Good day and welcome to Chapter 2, Classical-Based Theories of International Trade. So ayon po kay James Forrestal, for the way in which a durable peace can be created is by worldwide restoration of economic activity and international trade. So sa chapter po na to, madidiscuss natin yung mercantilism, theory of absolute advantage, theory of comparative advantage, and the Heckscher-Ohlin theory. So let's proceed to the introduction. An analysis of the history of the Philippine trade policy from 1905 to 2004, written by Christian Laluna, Arnil Paras, and Vanessa Suleva, published on the Arellano Law and Policy Review, Volume Number 1. They tried to analyze how the Philippine trade policy has evolved. According to that analysis, the authors are saying that making it easier for businesses to trade internationally is not just a random idea in the Philippines. So it is built into their government plans and they have to follow international rules about it. So understandable naman na every government of a country will always want to protect its own people, industries, and businesses. So na-discuss natin sa chapter 1, palaging may pros and cons sa international trade. And nasa country na yon kung mag-adapt ba sila sa trade policy, kung sa tingin nila ay magbe-benefit yung country nila as a whole. So, Lesson 2.1, International Trade Theories. So, habang lumilipas yung panahon is nakakapag-develop na ng mga panibagong theories yung ating mga economists. So, yung mga theories na yun yung nag-explain sa process ng international business trade. So, trade and international trade are different. So, trade ay yung exchanging of goods and services between two people or entities. Yung international trade naman, exchanging of goods or services between two people or two entities in two different countries. Kaya nga international yung trade, no? So, madaming factors na nag-influence sa international trade, gaya na lamang ng theories, policies, and business strategy. So, international trade theories is simply different theories to explain international trade. So, patungkol ng mga theories na to sa kung paano nga ba dapat makipag-exchange ng goods and services sa iba't ibang bansa at makakatulong din to para ma-determine kung ano nga ba yung dapat i-export, i-import, kung ilan, and kung saan mga bansa dapat maganap yung trade. As per chapter 1, these theories were initially company-based and were called classical theories. So, classical economists were oriented primarily toward growth economics, and their main concern was to explain how the wealth of nations could be increased. So, pares lang naman na importante yung classical theories about bansa at yung modern theories na meron tayo ngayon. So, dahil same silang nag-explain how nations expanded around the globe and built their wealth through trade. So, according to Reyes 2012, the main points of the classical theories of international trade are the following. So, trade is important stimulator of economic growth. It enlarges a country's consumption capacities, increases world output, and provides access to scarce resources and worldwide markets for products, without which poor countries would be unable to grow. So, dito, for example, si Hong Kong. Si Hong Kong is meron siyang product or services na wala tayo. As in, wala or hindi nag-i-exist sa atin. So, ang gagawin natin is makikipag-trade tayo sa kanila para magkaroon din tayo ng ganong product sa bansa natin. So, because of that, kapag nag-trade yung mga countries, syempre, lumalawak din yung market nila and dumadami din yung demand ng customers internationally. Sa resource scarcity naman, so it is the lack of availability of supplies required to maintain life or a certain quality of life. So we can obtain those resources by trading. Sa poor countries would be unable to grow. Dito naman is patungkol sa mga less developed countries. So makikipag-trade sila ng resources nila kapalit ng pera ng ibang bansa para may magamit sila sa pampatayo ng mga infrastructures, kagaya na lamang ng schools, hospitals, and so on. Number 2, Trade tends to promote greater international and domestic equality by equalizing factor prices, raising real incomes of trading countries, and making efficient use of each nation's and the world's resource endowments. So, for example, equal wages and incomes. So, nagtitrade kayo ng isang specific na product or services and alam mo na kung paano siya gawin kaya mas magagawa mo siya efficiently. Therefore, alam mo na yung gagastusin, alam mo na yung presyo at kikitain. So, by trading, countries can access a bigger variety of things at lower prices. Ibig sabihin, mas ma-afford na ng mga tao yung product or services na yun, and with that, they can have a better life. So, walang bansang identical, no? Lahat ay iba-iba. For example, napakadaming kahoy sa atin. So, sa ibang bansa ay wala or kulang ng mga kahoy sa kanila, doon na magaganap yung trade. So, resources natin into pera nila. So, pares lang naman makikinabang kasi nagkaroon sila ng wood and nagkaroon tayo ng money. Third, trade helps countries to achieve development by promoting and rewarding those sectors of the economy where individual countries have a comparative advantage, whether in terms of labor efficiency or factor endowments. So, halimbawa ulit, si country number 1 is sobrang galing gumawa ng sapatos and sobrang efficient kaysa sa ibang countries. So, yun yung advantage ni country number 1. So, yung ibang countries is makikipag-trade sila ngayon kay country number 1 imbis na gumawa sila ng sarili nilang sapatos. Fourth, in a world of free trade, international prices and cost of productions determine how much a country should trade in order to maximize its national welfare. Countries should follow the dictates of the principle of comparative advantage and not try to interfere with the free workings of the market. So, by following the principles of comparative advantage and letting markets operate freely, countries can trade to their advantage for better products and low prices. Last, number 5, in order to promote growth and development and outward-looking international policy, is required in all classes. So, self-reliance based on partial or complete isolation is asserted to be economically inferior to participation in a world of free, unlimited trade. So, mas mabuting open yung mga bansa sa trading and cooperation sa iba pang mga bansa kaysa sa sarili lang nila yung iniintindi nila. So, hindi kasi effective kapag ganon. Yung pakikihalubilo ng isang country sa mundo ng trading ay makakapagbigay ng mas better economic outcome. So, traditional ideas about international trade are not always right for today's world. Even though they might not always fit perfectly, international trade can still be a good thing. So, but each country needs to figure out its own way of doing things to make sure its economy grows and does well. In the middle of 90s, binago ng mga economists yung pananaw nila patungkol sa international trade business. Dati kasi tinitignan lang nila kung paano makipag-trade yung isang bansa sa isa pang bansa. Ngayon, tinitignan na nila sa isang specific na business, no? Pero ngayon, binago na nila yon and sa company na sila nakatuon at yun yung tinatawag nating modern theories. So, very helpful si modern theories dahil mas nag-guide yung business sa pagde-decide kung saan bansa nga ba the best mag-expand and para mas efficient din yung products and services nila kaysa sa ibang company. So, that's all po for lesson 2.1, International Trade Theories. Next reporter po tayo.
Mercantilism. This theory stated that a country's wealth was determined by the amount of its gold and silver holdings. Mercantilism believed that a country should increase its holdings of gold and silver by promoting exports and discouraging imports. The objective of country was to have a trade surplus or a situation where the value of exports are greater than the value of imports. Tunay na sukatan ng kayamanan ng isang bansa ay ang dami ng mahahalagang metal katulad ng ginto at pilak. Ito ang nagtulak sa mga kanluraning bansa na magpalawak at mag-unahan sa paghahanap ng mga bagong teritoryo sa labas ng Europa na maaaring magbigay sa kanila ng dagdag na yaman. Mahahalagang epekto ng merkantilismo ay ang pagtatatag ng mga malalakas na hukbong militar na nagtatanggol sa mga kolonyang bansa ng European. Higit na naging mahalaga ang ginto at pilak bilang pambayad sa barter trade o transaksyon sa papapalitan at pagtutumbasan ng produkto sa loob ng 200 years. Ang merkantilismo ang nagdikta sa ekspedisyon ng mga European sa daigdig. Sa pagtungtong na ika-19 siglo, unti-unting humina at tuluyan ang nawakasan ang merkantilismo. Ito ay napalitan ng higit na liberal ng prinsipyong pang-ekonomiko, ang malayang kalakalan. Tinitiyak ng mga kapong bandang kalahok sa kalakalan, kolonyan man o hindi, ay makikinabang sa kayamanan. Ang pagbabago na ito ay ang paniniwalang isa sa pangmatagalang impluwensya ng paglaganap ng kaisipang La Ilustrasyon. But during mercantilism time, the thought was that the national currency will be strong by creating the highest possible export or trade surplus export should be more than exports. That believed that the time that export bring an inflow of gold whereas import lead to the outflow of gold. Labor is the most important factor of production because without labor, the other factors of production would be of no use. Labor refers to the work performed by a person for a monetary consideration. It is the monetary consideration that forms part of the cost of production. Natural resources are those found in nature, including land. Land, trees, and mines are natural resources. And a major factor of production, capital goods consist of those goods which are produced by the economic system and are used as inputs in the production of further goods and services. Capital is often the one considered as a factor of production, which refers to the money or funds used to purchase the goods used in the production process. The entrepreneur is the one that combines the factors in the correct proportion and mobilizes them. That is why the entrepreneurship is considered as one of the factors of production. Before, only land, labor, and capital were the factors of production. In our modern times, entrepreneurship was added as the fourth factor of production. 1. Access to resources was a major driving force behind colonization during the mercantilist era. Colonizing nations sought to exploit the abundant and diverse natural resources found in their colonies to fuel economic growth, industrial development, and wealth accumulation. 2. The process of colonization involved the creation and exploitation of markets to further the economic interests of the colonizing nations, establishing and controlling markets in colonies with strategic objectives aimed at maximizing economic gains and ensuring a steady flow of profits. 3. Control of trade routes was a crucial aspect of colonization, allowing colonizing nations to dominate trade and ensure the flow of goods and resources to and from their colonies. Fourth, the accumulation of wealth during the era of colonization was a fundamental objective for colonizing nations. It involved various strategies and mechanisms to generate economic gains, both in the form of precious metals and economic resources. The price-specie flow mechanism was originally attributed to Scottish economist David Hume to illustrate how trade imbalances can self-correct and adjust under the gold standard. Fluctuations in prices in a country adjusts completely or partially by an inflow or outflow of gold or specie with adjust the price levels across borders and equalize them, bringing balance in international transactions and payment. According to Petty, surplus gain or surplus value leads to expanded reproduction, and that expanded reproduction is conditional on capital accumulation. This means that if a country has accumulated capital, it will have surplus value and consequently expanded reproduction. Accumulation of bullion, particularly gold and silver, was a key objective in the mercantilist economic doctrine. Nations believed that amassing precious metals would increase their wealth and power. Governments promoted export to earn gold and silver, while restricting imports to retain these metals within their borders. This policy aimed to create a favorable balance of trade and enhance the nation's economic strength. However, contemporary economic thought now emphasizes a more balanced and sustainable approach to trade and wealth creation. The balance of trade refers to the difference between the value of a country's exports, goods, and services sold to other countries, and the value of its imports, goods, and services purchased from other countries. During a specific period, typically a year, if a country exports more than it imports, it has trade surplus, while importing more than it exports results in a trade deficit. Aspects of economic and political strategy for many European powers. Mercantilism, the prevailing economic ideology in the 16th to 18th centuries, emphasized a nation's economic strength through the accumulation of wealth, particularly in the form of gold and silver. Protectionism and tariffs were central components of mercantilist economic policies. Mercantilism was characterized by the belief that a nation's wealth and power were derived from accumulating precious metals, primary gold and silver, and maintaining a favorable balance of trade. Protectionist measures were employed to achieve these objectives. State intervention and regulation played a pivotal role in shaping economic policies to advance the interests of the nation. The government's active involvement was aimed at maximizing exports, accumulating wealth in the form of precious metals, and enhancing the nation's overall economic strength. Military power played a significant role in the mercantilist era. During the period of mercantilism, 16th to 18th centuries, the accumulation of wealth and ensuring the prosperity of the nation were closely tied to military strength and capabilities. Population growth and labor policies were key components of mercantilist strategies, aiming to ensure a sufficient workforce and economic growth for the nation. These policies were designed to support the accumulation of wealth, the development of industries, and expansion of trade. Centuries, primarily during the mercantilist era, these acts were a crucial part of trade regulation aimed at promoting British shopping, trade, and economic interests. Commercial treaties and diplomacy were essential tools in advancing mercantilist economic objectives, establishing trade relationships, securing markets, and ensuring the prosperity and power of nations during the mercantilist era. Neo-mercantilism, often referred to as economic nationalism or mercantilism in a modern context, is an economic ideology that shares some similarities with traditional mercantilism but adapts to contemporary economic realities and global trade dynamics. While free trade is a system that allowed for liberalization, which would pave the way for a freely initiated trade and engage the maximum possible number of people, bringing benefits to most parties and lead to further development of all participants in the long run.
Hello everyone, my name is CHIAN MARUTO and I will going to discuss about the absolute advantage. So absolute advantage means that a producer can produce a good or a service in greater quantity for the same cost or the same quantity at a lower cost. Or the producer can produce the same quantity of product or service for a lesser quantity of inputs and therefore lower marginal cost than other producers without compromising the quantity. So pag sinabi po nating marginal cost, ito yung mga karagdagang gastusin para sa mga karagdagang produkto na gagawin. Ang capitalism naman po, from the word capital or puhunan, ito yung sistema sa ekonomiya kung saan kung sino ang may puhunan siya ang dominant. Ibig sabihin, the higher the capital, the higher the production. So under po nito yung investment, means of production, distribution, and exchange. And most of means of production are privately owned and the production is guided and income distributed largely through the operation of market. Hindi po ito sakop ng gobyerno, hindi ito pagmamay-ari ng gobyerno. Modern capitalism. This came out in a view as a result of the physiocrats in France after 1850 and devastating impact that the ideas of Adam Smith relative to the principle and practice of mercantilism. So the term physiocracy itself, introduced by Dupont de Nemours, literally translate the to the rule of nature. So this is the first well-developed theory of economics. So the most significant contribution of physiocrats was their emphasis on productive work as the source of national wealth. So this is contrary to the mercantile or mercantilism theory. So nakasaad or physiocracy believe the that hindi lang sa gold and silver nakasalalay ang kayamanan ng isang bansa, kung hindi sa size ng net product ng bansa. And alam niyo po ba noong 1776, Adam Smith questions the leading mercantile theory of that time. So Smith offered a new trade theory called absolute advantage. So this theory, which is absolute advantage, emphasized to explain the reason of foreign trade. And this theory and the trade and international division of labor that its support shows that both countries will benefit from international trade and the world resources will be used in most optimal way. So sinasabi po dito na yung isang bansa ay mag-manufacture ng produkto that they are efficient or they can produce efficiently at a lower cost, and so they can export it and mag-import na lamang po ng produkto that they are relatively less efficient and at a higher cost. So in this way po, yung mga bansa will benefit both or they can benefit from both. For example po nito si Japan and US. If Japan can produce cars at a lower cost than US, and si US naman nakakapag-produce ng trucks at a lower cost than Japan, then si Japan ay mag-import na lamang ng trucks from US, and si US mag-import ng cars from Japan. And dito po sa example na to, makikita po natin kung paano nag-work yung absolute advantage at kung paano nakaka-benefit yung dalawang country. So the last one is the configurations of the essence of Adam Smith theory of absolute advantage, theory of international trade, and theory of economic development. So dito po sa division of labor, this is a separation of work through specializations in production and exchange. And a specialization increases productivity through technical and organizational innovations. So, of course, pag maraming output ang napoproduce, this will increase in nation's wealth of, and of course, this will lead to economic development o paglago ng ekonomiya.
Good day everyone, I am ELLYZA Parehado from Group 2 and now I'm gonna talk about theory of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is an economy's ability to produce a particular good or service at a lower opportunity cost than its trading partners. Comparative advantage is used to explain why companies, countries, or individuals can benefit from trade. Marginal cost is the extra cost acquired in the production of additional units of goods or services, most often used in manufacturing. It's calculated by dividing change in costs by change in quantity and the result of fixed costs for items already produced and variable costs that still need to be accounted for. Opportunity cost is the value or benefit David Ricardo, an English economist, introduced the theory of comparative advantage in 1817. While the theory of comparative advantage is attributed to Ricardo, Adam Smith was among the first to put in writing the theory. Relative productivity compares the productivity of different entity or country, while absolute productivity looks at an entity or country's productivity without regard to the other entities or countries. Industrial capitalism as a mode of production consisting of large, centrally controlled accumulations of capital used to finance the means of production for commodities destined for market, using largely wage labor and characterized by large-scale production, accumulation, and limited private ownership. Free trade works even if one country ends up with an absolute advantage in producing all products or all aspects of producing a good or service, because other countries would still have comparative advantages in the production of some goods and services. David Ricardo started out as a successful stockbroker, making 100 million in today's dollars. After reading Adams' The Wealth of Nations, he became an economist. Monetarism is a macroeconomic theory which states that governments can foster economic stability by targeting the growth rate of the money supply. The law of diminishing returns says that if you keep increasing one factor in the production of goods, such as your workforce, while keeping all the other factors the same, you'll reach a point beyond which additional increases will result in a progressive decline in output. In older economic terms, comparative advantage has been opposed by mercantilism and economic nationalism. They argue that while a country may initially be comparatively disadvantaged in a given industries, countries should shelter and invest in industries until they become globally competitive.
Itong theory ni David Ricardo tungkol sa comparative advantage ay tungkol sa paggamit ng mga kalakaran sa pagtangkilik ng mga bansa. Base sa theory, kung may marami ang isang bansa ng mga bagay na kailangan sa paggawa ng mga produkto, mas maganda na sila na mismo ang gumawa nito at ibenta sa ibang bansa. Pero kung may mga bagay na kulang sa kanila para sa paggawa, mas okay na bilhin na lang ito mula sa ibang bansa. Sa ganitong way is lahat ay makakakuha ng idea at lahat sila ay magtutulungan. Si Bertin Allyn, isang economist, noong 1920s, naging interesado siya sa theory niya tungkol sa pag-aangkat at pag-export ng mga produkto ng isang bansa. Kasama niya sa pagsisearch yung kanyang teacher na si Ellie Philip Herscher. Yung theory nila is tinatawag nilang itong Herscher-Allyn theory o HO theory. Base sa kanilang theory, kung mayroon ng isang bansa na may maraming sangkap o bagay na magagamit sa paggawa ng produkto, ay mas magiging maganda ito sa paggawa ng mga produkto na gumagamit ng mga bagay nito. Example, kung yung isang bansa na maraming lupa, mas magiging mabilis at mas maganda ang kanilang paggawa ng mga produkto na kailangan ng lupa. Example ng mga prutas o kaya ng gulay. Ito ay nagsasabi kung bakit nagtutulungan ang mga bansa sa pamamagitan ng mga kalakal. Ipinapakita nito na mas maganda ang kalalabasan kapag ang bawat bansa ay nagproduce ng mga bagay na marami sila. Ibig sabihin, mas mabilis at mas mura ang produksyon. Kaya naman ito ay tinatawag din na resource and trade theory. Ang theory ng Herscher-Allyn ay nagsasabi na iba-iba ang kakayahan ng mga bansa sa paggawa ng produkto, dahil may mga bagay na mas madali at mas mura gawin sa isang bansa kaysa sa iba. Example, kung may maraming manggagawa sa isang bansa, mas magiging mura ang paggawa ng mga produkto na kailangan ng maraming manggagawa. Kung may maraming kagamitan o puhunan naman ang isang bansa, mas mura naman gawin ang mga produkto na kailangan ng mga ito.